Welcome to the Interstate Mets Report with your hosts, Nelson and Chris.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Nelson here, aka Amish Country Mets fan. As always, joined by my guy Chris. Apologies for the delay. We were having some technical difficulties, but here we are on a beautiful Friday. What is going on, Chris?
What's up? What's up? Great to be back. Hopefully everyone can hear me at home. I am still dealing with some technical difficulties, so I definitely apologize about that. If we do start to cut out, we'll try to mitigate the best that we can. But it's another beautiful day. Happy Friday to everybody, and glad to be back for episode 37. We got, I guess, a little bit of breaking news here at the top of the hour with Jeff Passan dropping the bomb on us in the reliever market. So.
Yeah, Josh Hader is now a Houston Astro. The Astros always find a way to get better year to year, it seems. So, good pickup for them. I believe that was a $95 million contract I read. Something like that, anyways. So, yeah, good for them. We were definitely never going to be in on that market. So, no loss to the Mets there. But yeah, we got a few things to talk about. The offseason is definitely lagging so far. Before we jump into it, just want to say I see some comments. What up, John? Maybe they have some breaking news. No, I mean, other than the hater news, no breaking news. Mason, what up, Mason from MSNNY? And Big Brother, happy Friday, guys. Yeah, trying to stay warm. It's been a very cold week out here. So let's jump into it. First topic today, Mark Vientos. Got Chris here as Mark Vientos 2024 projections per Fangraphs. So we're looking at 245, 746 OPS in about 14 at bats, 14 doubles, 16 homers, 48 RBIs. Those numbers, I mean, for 300 at bats, I guess they're not horrible. What are your thoughts here on the projections for Mark Vientos, and do you think that's enough? And do you still want us to? I think I know your answer, but do you still want us to get another bat into for the DH spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have to go get a DH bat. I think we've been stressing that importance on all of our live streams here, whether it's on the Hot Stove Live or here or our respective channels. We know that the Mets still need a bat, right? I think that we're both in the camp of understanding that Justin Turner might fit the mold a little bit best for the New York Mets heading into 2024. But the Jorge Soler rumors and the steam that that's picking up is something that definitely can be plausible as well. We all know my thoughts and opinions on that, but I looked at these Fangraph projections for Mark Vientos, and I was like, this is really interesting because honestly, if he could even if he could mimic this exact projection as a split time DH with DJ Stewart, which is what I'm guessing Fangraphs is projecting him at, then I would be totally happy with this. Honestly, I would definitely take this. I do think that he can turn in a little bit more home run production. I think that Mark Vientos at his peak is a 20 to 25 home run guy. So 16 home runs might be sliding him a little bit. But then again, he's not getting that full 500 to 600 at bats. He's only getting 314 here, presumably splitting time. And if the Mets do roll with Mark Vientos as the DH, I would rather them not play the lefty-righty matchup game with DJ Stewart, although that's inevitably what they're going to do just due to the analytics department. But I think that if we can get this sort of production from Mark Vientos in year two, that would certainly be plausible in terms of making the case of the Mets being a competitive ball club. And if he produces something to this effect, right? If Mark Vientos isn't the end all be all for the New York Mets, which I presumably think, and I've thought all this offseason that he isn't, then you could potentially see a trade market develop for him next offseason as well. I know a lot of people are not really wanting to go that far in terms of projecting trades for current Mets players in the next offseason. But like I said, you have a competitive team molding up in terms of the prospect category. This or going into next offseason, or even this season, we'll see a couple debuts here and there. Maybe Drew Gilbert, maybe Luis Angel Acuna, and we'll see if Mark Vientos is part of this team moving forward, depending on what he does here. But maybe he plays up his trade value. I don't know, but all I know is that right now, with what we know in terms of the Mets' interest in the DH market and upgrading the offensive lineup, I think that these numbers certainly do play well for a potential 2024 DH spot with Mark Vientos headlining.
What if I told you that Daniel Vogelback basically put this up last year?
Well, I wouldn't be. This is the thing. We would expect that from. First of all, I don't even know what Daniel Vogelback's numbers are, so he might
I'm
have
I'm looking
really.
I'm looking at them right now. So he had 319 plate appearances, which is only 5 more than this. He hit 13 homers, which is 3 off. 48 RBIs, which is exact. His OPS was 742, which would be 4 points under what Vientos is projected. So the only other thing, 233 was his batting average. So they have Vientos hitting a little higher than that. But pretty much, and he had 8 doubles. He's a slow guy, so Vientos has him on that. But pretty much you're looking at not identical, but very close projection from Vientos to what Daniel Vogelback gave us in 2023. To me, that's not quite good enough. I need a little more. Obviously, it depends on what you're getting because this is obviously a platoon situation with if he's only getting 300 at bats, so you'd have to see what you got from the other side of that platoon. But I mean, I don't know. To me, it's not bad given what he's done so far in his career, but if we're looking for an improvement from last year, this is pretty much not much of one if you're just looking at it number to number.
Yeah, and I think that it would be a fair these are fair projections for Vientos given what we saw in the small sample size in 65 games from him last season. And I think that these projections are sort of, I guess, diluting that sort of year two progression, especially given into account the split time with a potential DJ Stewart. So, like I said, if we see, depends on how many game sample size we see these statistics play out. These are only projections at the end of the day. Like Big Brother Think is saying in the comment section, he says he thinks Vientos beats these projections, which honestly I wouldn't be surprised with either. I think this production would be fair for Mark Vientos in year two. But like I said, the whole thing is like our argument for being okay with Mark Vientos, one, is because it's the bridge year. Two, we were all saying and everybody's been saying that, Mark Vientos presumably is going to produce more over the long haul of the season than Daniel Vogelback. So it's kind of surprising that these projections are pretty much on par with what Daniel Vogelback pretty much turned out. But nonetheless, like I said, I've said this countless of times, the Mets still need a DH at the end of the day. Like they need to go out there if they're in the best interest, if their interest is winning ball games and being competitive in September and October, we know we need that DH, and Mark Vientos probably isn't the most competitive option there. But if we're in the interest of letting Mark Vientos show that he can be better than last season and also be better than what these projections are giving him right now that you see on your screen, then we can start to have a different conversation. But like I said, I'm not going to deviate away from my story, right? With David Stearns' comments, we talked about this on the Hot Stove Live last night. We could sort of foreshadow just a little bit that maybe Mark Vientos is going to be that guy in terms of the DH spot. And they're going to go in-house. Because honestly, at this point, with what I've heard, I wouldn't expect an offensive upgrade. I'd expect bullpen, and then we ride with what we got, like you were saying. But if they do go get an offensive upgrade, great. That shows me that they really are, in the interest of winning more ball games. So I just thought that it was interesting when I was putting these slides together, like seeing these metrics right here. And honestly, I put this up on Twitter, and I had a couple people chime in and say they would definitely take these stats out of Mark Vientos at the end of 2024 at face value for right now. And like I said, when you have a guy that batted what 211 last year with 9 home runs in 65 games, like honestly, I can't disagree with that. Like at face value, I would take that production from Mark Vientos. Now does
I
this
just think
drive
it's
up?
funny that like most people would say they take that production out of Mark Vientos, but they hated Daniel
Yep.
Vogelback, and the numbers are damn near the same. So it is kind of interesting to see. And I get it. Vogelback is slow. Vogelback would sit there and stare at pitches like right down the middle of the plate. The approach, I guess, was really frustrating with Vogelback. But if you look at it from a number standpoint purely, and that's it, you take your bias out of it. I mean, Daniel
Yeah.
Vogelback basically gave you this season. So it's just interesting the way people look at things, even though you're not getting, if this is correct, which he could very much outshine these numbers. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But if this is indeed what he gave you, then you're looking at Daniel Vogelback 2.0.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And so my counter question to you now is, and the chat could definitely chime in. And by the way, shout out everybody in the chat. Just want to shout out John, Stony, Amizi, Big Brother Think, Timothy, Mason, all these guys in the chat. Keep dropping your comments. And I'm sorry that we're working with a little bit of technical difficulties. And hopefully you all hear me on your side pretty well because my internet's bugging out right now. But nonetheless, we persevere. If he beats these projections, let's just say he hits 22 home runs, the RBI total goes up by default to say, maybe, let's say 55, 56 RBIs, and he drops his average by 5 points, hits 240. Are we going to be okay with that? Because honestly, I think that is Mark Vientos' ceiling, and that's what the attraction to Mark Vientos is. We know he's going to strike out at a high clip. We know that. But what sort of home run production does he turn out? And I think that he can beat 22 to home. I think he can beat 16 home runs easy. And I think he can be that 22 to 25 home run guy, personally speaking. And thank you, big brother. Hopefully that remains clear and my feed remains clear because it's just showing on my screen that it's bugging out. But like I said, if I drop out, I will be back in. Just bear with us. This is a little bit of a weird situation. I'm not in my usual setup. But yeah, like Nelson, if he hits 22 home runs, ups the RBI totals, and maybe the average dips a little bit, are we taking that? Are we okay with that?
I mean, you kind of have to be, don't you? Like it is what it is. Like, I think I mean I always want a guy that can hit. Like my issue with Pete last year is average dipped a little bit below what I'm comfortable with. I prefer a guy that can hit at least 250 and give me that power production. I don't necessarily like the Kyle Schwarber 199 and 40 home runs and that's all you're getting approach. But yeah, I mean, I'll take whatever I can get out of Vientos if he's our guy. Uh I just still feel like we need I really do just feel like we need a DH. And to that point, I guess was it Heyman that had a report out that the Mets are still indeed looking for a bat. So we know we've talked about these reporters over and over. We know how that is, but hopefully that is
Yeah.
true.
Yep.
Before we move on, I do want to catch up on some of these comments. Big Brother said he'd take that from him, add a few more homers, about 10 ribbies. Yeah, if you do that, I don't think that's horrible. Stevie Mack, what up, Stevie? One of the most boring free agencies in a while, for sure. It's been
Yeah.
dead hater sign, so hopefully maybe that starts an uptick in the moves. If you get out of Vientos and get a Marte close to 2022, then the Mets are straight. Marte is the key. Yeah, we've said that before on these lives. Like, do I really think you're going to get 2022 Marte? I honestly don't. But if he can at least give you part of that and not just be a black hole out there like he was last year, you need something out of him. Because if he's last year's Marte, then our lineup's screwed. We just unless we do go out and get somebody else, because we need more production and we got to get it somewhere. Marte bouncing back would be big for us. Timothy, what up, Timothy? Happy Friday, guys. Should the Mets sign Pete Alonso to a long-term contract extension by opening day? I think we all agree that they should. And will they? I've kind of lost hope on that one at this point. I think we're going to see him go to free agency, and then we'll see what happens from there. Vientos is better, going to stay positive. Hope he beats the projections. Stoney, what up? Says, what up? What up, Stoney? He thinks we need Soler. I mean, I'd take Soler. Obviously, I'm on the Justin Turner trade, but we'll see. John says they can't give him the job. They need to let DH part-time and sign an actual DH. Yeah. Everybody says they hear you, and then Turner and him start doing steroids. Who's going? Oh goodness. I say the whole team starts doing steroids. Let's just bring back the '90s steroid era. So let's move on from Mark Vientos and talk a little bit about updated prospect rankings from Baseball Prospectus. So what you're looking at here, if you look at the top, those were the MLB rankings end of season last year. Baseball Prospectus, obviously, it's a different people ranking these kids, so that's why you see such a discrepancy here. Part of the reason why. MLB had Luis Angel Acuna at 38, Drew Gilbert at 52, Jet Williams at 78, Mauricio at 87. Baseball Prospectus, I don't know. I'm assuming they graduated Mauricio.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Yeah.
So they have Jet Williams at 23. Drew Gilbert flew up to 29. Ryan Clifford's on their list at 76. Luis Angel Acuna drops to 77, and Christian Scott makes their top 100 at number 88. What are your thoughts here? What are you thinking? Obviously, Acuna, based on, if you see here down at the bottom, Acuna's 31 games in Double-A, only hit 243 with a 622 OPS, 304 slugging. So you have to assume that had a lot to do with him dropping down a little bit here. But then again, we haven't seen MLB's rankings yet. They might not have dropped them as much. We'll see when they drop their rankings. But how do you feel about these rankings, and would you change anything here? Would you have dropped Acuna this far down, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think rankings are just rankings at the end of the day, and I hope people realize that. Like, these guys are getting ranked by whoever it may be, and it doesn't really translate to how successful they're going to be. Obviously, that's the obvious statement. I was very surprised to see Luis Angel Acuna drop that much, but honestly, he had an abysmal couple of games right there in the 37-game stretch with the New York Mets organization in Binghamton when he came over. So I guess I understand it. My whole thing with Luis Angel Acuna is his frame, and I think that's what part of what went into these rankings. He's a smaller framed guy. We know we're going to get the speed, but is that power, that lack of power, I should say, going to translate to the MLB? He does have pop in his bat. I'm not going to say that he can't hit home runs at the major league level, but can he do it consistently? And I guess you can say the same thing for Jet Williams. Can that translate over to the major league level with that smaller frame? And I'm not discounting anybody that is at their stature, at their weight. We see guys all the time be successful and come up, a la Bregman, a la Jose Altuve, those Astros guys. But that is a real concern. So I think that they have everything playing into factor here of why they dropped Luis Angel Acuna, which makes a little bit of sense to me, right? Because this day and age, baseball is moving to sort of a feel of, let's go get the power guy, the home run guy, and then that's what we're going to sort of prioritize here. And you see that directly with Ryan Clifford, right? Big power lefty bat. 6'3", 205-pound frame, hit 24 home runs collectively in all the leagues that he was in. I believe he was an A-ball and high A-ball last season as well. For Ryan Clifford, hit 24 home runs collectively. So to see him ahead of Luis Angel Acuna tells me a lot about how they value power and those bigger frames. So I wouldn't be too worried, but we'll get into the excess of middle infield talent here in a second. But yeah, this I'm already on the Drew Gilbert hive. Like Drew Gilbert was already respected by the MLB in their rankings up top at the end of the 2023 season. We see how much more how much more respect he got. Contrastingly so, when Drew Gilbert came over in that Astros trade for Justin Verlander, he hit 325. He had a ridiculous, I think he hit I want to say 6 home runs in that time frame, which is not too much. He's not known for a power guy, but he had a ridiculous 30-plus game stretch in Double-A for the Mets organization, within the Mets organization. So I like what we have here, and I like your boy Christian Scott. Like, that's your guy. I know that's your guy too. Number 88, the pitching has been sort of a question mark in the Mets' farm system here for quite some time. It's great to see a pitcher make these rankings, right? And at the end of the day, I want to sum this all up and say rankings are rankings. We saw Brett Beatty was on Baseball Prospectus's list in 2023 when they did that. I was looking at that as well. He was the number 19 overall prospect in the entire major leagues, man. And we see what he's produced at the major league level. So take these with a grain of salt. I think Luis Angel Acuna is going to certainly play well for the Mets, for this Mets team that's prioritizing speed. He is honestly a guy that we talk about Nimmo, and there's been a lot of conversations on Twitter about, is Nimmo going to be that leadoff guy for the New York Mets in future years, right? With his, I guess, move toward more of a power approach, do we need another leadoff hitter? And I think Luis Angel Acuna with that speed can definitely fit that mold in terms of getting on base and being that speed guy that can swipe a bag at any point. So I'm not worried. I like the prospect list. It's nice to see some Mets representation. 5 prospects within the Mets farm system within the top 101 according to BP is awesome. And just guys that just missed the list was a guy like Marco Vargas and Jeremy Rodriguez as well. 2 guys that came over in the last deadline for David Robertson and Tommy Pham, respectively. This Mets front office did really, really well. And I commend them for that. So it's a bright future. Above all else, the point that I want to drive home here is that the Mets have a bright future. And you can certainly see that transpire on this list.
Yeah, they really do. And I will echo what you said. These prospect rankings really don't mean jack. Like they just don't. Um, it's more about it's really more about the scouting and what we really see out of these guys when their approach at the plate, their ability to adjust to pitchers and this, that, and the other. And that all develops over time. But I mean, if we were going just by prospect rankings, Alex Ramirez would have been a shoe-in uh, to be a star because he was considered one of the better prospect guys.
Absolutely.
I mean, you see, Kevin Parada isn't on this list. For a while last year, he was towards the top of these lists. A guy like, let's go back, a guy like Jacob DeGrom, he was never a highly rated prospect. He ended up being a Cy Young Award winner. So these lists, while they're nice, while they give you a little bit of a barometer of what you're going to get, in the end of the day, it don't mean jack. These guys, just because Luis Angel Acuna had a bad end of last year, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to suck this year. He may tear it up and he might fly right back up the list. So you never know. And the power develops over time, especially with these smaller guys. Like, he still has time to develop that power. I don't think he's ever going to be his brother, obviously. Different
Yeah.
frame
Yeah.
kind of guy, but he's got potential and he's got that speed that's phenomenal. Same with Jet Williams. If he can get the ball in the air a little more, he hits the ball on the ground a lot. That's a problem Brett Beatty had, right? So Brett Beatty, while everyone was talking him up when he was in the minors, the big but to his game was the guy hits the ball on the ground a lot. And we saw that when he came up to the majors, and he hasn't been able to shake it. So if he can elevate the ball a little more, that'll help his game. Jet Williams, I mean, man, what can I say about Jet? He's to me, he's gonna he's as close to a lock to be a really good baseball player as there is on this list. I just love everything about his game, his approach at the plate, the way he takes pitches, his contact skills, his speed. Like he's all around just a phenomenal player. Hopefully, it translates, right? But yeah, man, the prospect rankings don't really mean anything, but it is nice to see that we have 5 guys on the list. And to be honest, like you said, we have a few guys that are knocking on the door too. So, guys have some good months of baseball. We might even see more guys on this list when they update. I think they update sometime in around the All-Star break. They update the list again. So we
Yeah,
shall see
midway.
what
What do you
happens.
think about this comment? What do you think about this comment? Who comes up first of all these guys? What's your
Yeah,
thought?
so we talked about that on the what you call it, the hot stove live last night. I feel like it's Acuna just based on his being on the 40 man already. I know you can finagle the 40 man and whatnot, but to me, I can see a world where I mentioned yesterday third base. They probably wouldn't move McNeil to third base. I don't know that he has the arm for third base, but I can see a world where something happens where one of the outfielders get hurt or they have an emergency and they need to move McNeil around in the infield, and instead of playing like a Wendell or who the hell knows, a Tyrone Taylor, you move McNeil around to where he needs to be, and then you put Acuna at second base. Like I can very much see that happening. Um, and I could see that happening before them. So if it comes down to them wanting to save a guy and not having to cut him from the 40 man to bring up Drew Gilbert, I
Mhm.
could see a world where they do that instead of move McNeil to the outfield and let Acuna play second and give more time to figure out the roster crunch. So that's the only reason I go with Acuna. But honestly, him and Gilbert are both going to be close. It could be either one. I think Williams is definitely a little further away. He just hit Double A at the end of last year. Um, Clifford, I think we're gonna wait a little while on him. I don't see
Yeah,
Scott.
he needs.
Scott's probably, if anything, an end of the year guy. I think we'd see a guy not listed on this list before Scott, pitching wise, is Mike Vassell. I think we'd
Yep.
see him first. So yeah, I'd go with Acuna, but I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Gilbert is the guy.
Yeah, and that's my line of thinking as well. I think it's gonna be Drew Gilbert. I just think that he's probably the most ready of these guys with what he's shown as of recent. I know that's recency bias, but honestly, on the Mets Hot Stove Live that we did last night, go check that out on the channel. Both of our channels, if you haven't done so already, we were on with Talking Mets with Rob. Shout out him. Always does great live streams. But like I said, I think that we get into a situation, especially if we find ourselves at the MLB trade deadline, not competing the way that this front office would have liked this team to compete. I think we see at least debuts from maybe 4 of these 5 guys here on the secondary list. Like I would not be surprised. Now, this is something to be said for like how quickly is David Stearns going to move these guys up to the major league level. There's something to be said about rushing prospects, but I do think I think that's a little bit of an overrated argument because I think that, you know, it can't be undone. You take the gamble of rushing a guy. I understand if he comes up and struggles. I think that that damage can be undone. I get that it's not, I guess, the best sort of situation that you want to put them in. But what if they come up and kill it? Their confidence is at an all-time high, and you know what you got. So I think that is an interesting situation to play out, especially if the Mets aren't as competitive as we all think they're going to be at the deadline. It'll be interesting to see how David Stearns approaches that.
Yeah, the only thing, and let's face it, like no matter how much money our owner has, every team is conscious of service time, right? So I think that could also play a factor in not seeing some of these guys come up at a certain point in the season, because let's face it, you want to get that extra year or two of control over these guys. It's just a fact. That's the way teams work. So if there's a situation where it's like 50-50, I could see it swinging towards them keeping them in the minors just so they can have that extra service time with these kids. So that's a possibility as well. Um, Gilbert and Acuna, though, I think for sure we will see. Um, Williams, again, depends on how he does, depends on how the season goes. Like you said, if we decide, you know what, we stink and we need to trade off whatever we can for more prospects, and we want to see what the kids have at the end of the year, then yeah, we could see a world where they just blow it all up and say, let the kids take the wheel and have them kind of build for 2025, right? So lots of possibilities. Who knows where we end up? Um, but it's a good problem to have, man. And we'll get here into the next topic, but I want to catch up on some of these comments again.
Hit that thumbs up, guys. We got about 32 people in the chat. Hit that thumbs up on both streams. Make sure you're checking both of us out. We thoroughly appreciate the support. Thank you so much.
Appreciate everybody watching. Get M easy as we get closer to spring. Free agency market could, that's entirely possible, right? I said it yesterday on the Hot Stove Live. The Mets and Stearns could very much be waiting to see if the market does come to them in some of these situations, and I think it will be a situation where they look at it and go, okay, the market comes down, we'll go ahead and add these guys, but if it doesn't, then we're just gonna go with what we got. So it's very much a 50-50 thing on whether or not we do see additions or we just kind of roll with the roster we got. Sanders says it's a good day to sign Robert Stevenson. Hey, that's not a bad, definitely not a bad arm. I don't know. So far, Stearns has been steadfast with his minor league deals for bullpen guys. So we'll see if we actually sign a guy to a major league deal. Hey guys, we went over that one already. Jason, let's go 2024 Mets. Yeah, for sure. Stevie Parada isn't. Yeah, Parada had a bad year, right? But again, I said this in a video I shot a couple days ago. Like, it's 1 year. Like, these prospects are just like anybody else. Like, things can change. He can bounce back. Just because he had one bad year doesn't mean his career's over, right? A guy I look at, though, when I look at prospects and look at what they've done in their career so far, Alex Ramirez is a guy where, like, this is a make or break year for him. Like, he's been in the system for a few years now.
Yeah.
Last year was the year he was supposed to take off, and he didn't. He had a horrible season. So he's a guy that this year, if he doesn't produce something, then we're pretty much screwed because nobody's going to trade for him at that point. And he's just going to be another on the long list of outfield prospects that we thought were going to be stars and ended up being crap. So,
hey, I like on that point though, 2 points there. I like what Alex Ramirez has to show for, to be honest with you. I know he had a down year, but I was watching him in spring training. I believe he was up this past spring training in 2023, and I like what I see out of his bat. And I think that I see a nice controlled swing, so I wouldn't discount him either. And in terms of Parada, the question that I have for you before we move on to the next topic and get into some more comments here is that obviously we know what we have in Francisco Alvarez, right? I think we see the bat remain a little bit more consistent in terms of the average, but we know in terms of the power what we have in Francisco Alvarez, and especially the defensive side of the ball, he's going to be the future catcher. You have albeit a 16-year-old in Giovanni Rodriguez coming up in the international free agent class, guys are going to want, or teams rather, are going to want the Kevin Paradas of the world, and maybe they might even take a stab at the Alex Ramirez's of the world. Do you think Kevin Parada is expendable now, given that you have young catching talent coming up and what you already have in Francisco Alvarez, or would you like to remain on the Parada train and not let him go at all costs unless you absolutely have to in order to potentially shift him to maybe, I don't want to say first base because that would have to depend on what Pete Alonso's situation is, but you get my drift here. What would you do with Parada?
I don't see him as a keep him at all cost guy. The problem I see, and this is what a lot of fans, it frustrates me a little bit because a lot of fans do this when it comes to trading prospects. Why would a team at this point want a Kevin Parada or an Alex Ramirez? They're both coming off of horrible seasons. Their stock is pretty low at this point, so it's going to be hard to get a team to center a trade around these guys. To me, what you hope is that they have a bounce back year and build up their value so that you can then look at a team and say, yeah, Parada and Ramirez are the highlights of the deal. They're not like extra throw-ins. These are the guys you're getting for whoever. And then you don't have to add more pieces to a trade. So my reasoning for wanting to keep a guy like Parada is I want him to build his trade value back up, right? I don't really see him as a Met going forward. His catching ability has not been very good. I could have seen a world where if he could improve his defense and his bat was still solid, you could see him come up as a catcher and maybe you can save Alvarez's legs and maybe DH him or what have you, or move, or you could move Parada. But at this point, like, I'm not even worried about any of that. I'm worried about him figuring out his game, fixing whatever his issues were at the plate, fixing his defense, and getting to a point where a team looks at you and goes, "Yeah, you know what? We really want that guy." And because you have an Alvarez, then that does make him somewhat expendable. But for right now, I would hold off because I just don't think you're going to get the value that you want out of him. And maybe he doesn't. If he has another bad year, it is what it is. He probably won't build up that value, and then you're going to have to just hope that a team takes a chance, and maybe you can add a couple other guys and work out a deal that way. But that's where I'm at with Parada, and even to a lesser extent Ramirez. Ramirez just has to figure things out because I don't think anybody at this point would want the guy. It just he just hasn't panned out. He did look somewhat solid in spring training last year. Maybe they can figure something out. Maybe he goes back to spring and Chavez works with him and he bounces back. He has the pedigree, right? So anything can happen, and that's where John's comment here. These are prospects. You have no idea what they'll become. He's right. You really don't like it. They can be stars or they can be utter trash. And it's not just these bigger name guys. It's you can have guys come out of nowhere. Jeff McNeil. Who would have thought Jeff McNeil wasn't some top prospect? Like who would have thought he was going to make a major league roster and be a batting champion? Like that wasn't, I don't think, on anybody's radar. Brandon Nimmo was a pretty highly regarded guy. Nobody, I don't think Pete, to an extent, nobody really had him like huge up on the prospect rankings. He's a guy that developed and ended up being better than I think a lot of people expected. For a while, people thought Dom Smith was better than Pete. Look how that worked out. Dom Smith ended up sucking, and we ended up getting rid of him, and he hasn't had much of a career. So these things change year by year, month to month. So let's see. Everybody's talking about the 2022 Mets, but not talking about the 2015 Mets. I'm not sure I understand.
I know exactly where he's going with that. He's saying that the 2015 Mets were pretty much thought of as a dumpster team in terms of the roster construction.
Oh,
And they made it to where they wanted to make it. And contrastingly so, the Mets won 101 games in the regular season, got bounced in the wild card. So I know what you're putting down, Mark. And I honestly, I don't know if I can disagree with you. And I'm not saying the Mets are going to make the World Series this year whatsoever. And I know we got John in here in the chat, and he's a big David Stearns hater, and he hates what the Mets are doing right now. And I hear you, John, but honestly, I mean, Mark, you make a valid point. This is professional sports at the end of the day. We saw what the Diamondbacks did last season. Anything is possible. Am I going to put my money down on a Mets World Series appearance or even the NLCS? No, absolutely not. But stranger things have happened. That's why we watch sports. So.
Yeah, and that's indeed his point. Like it is a valid point because who's to say this team can't play well enough to be in the hunt at the trade deadline and pull off a deal for that difference maker, that whoever it is, the Yoenis Cespedes of 2024, and you go on a run. Like that can happen. It's not likely, but it's possible. This roster isn't bad enough that I think it's just a lost cause. It's got its flaws for sure, but yeah, anything can happen. Like I said it before. I could see this being another 70 something win team, and I can also see it being an 80 something win team. It just depends on different factors: health, how the kids play out, how Severino bounces back, how Marte does. It's all up in the air, right?
Above all else, the one point that I'll make on that, and I think the difference is here, and what we're talking about between the 2015 Mets and the 2024 Mets coming up is the rotation. I feel like that's going to be the biggest X factor in terms of this team moving forward. How do those pitchers sort of bounce back in their careers, or maybe they don't bounce back, but how do they sort of respond, those Luis Severinos and those Sean Manayas, right? How do they sort of back up Kodai Singh in their rotation? I feel like that's what the X factor and the difference maker is going to be in terms of the Mets being somewhat respectable versus them being complete crap in 2024. That's probably what I would say is my biggest X factor right now.
Yeah, for sure. But let's be real. The 2015 Mets rotation, you look back now and say, okay, they had DeGrom, they had Mats, they had Harvey, they had Syndergaard. A lot of those guys weren't them like the peak selves yet. Like at that point, DeGrom was still not DeGrom. He was getting there. Harvey, I think, was the actual stud in that staff. Syndergaard wasn't quite dominant yet, but he was very good. And Matt's had a solid 2015, but he was okay. Like that, but that rotation wasn't exactly lights out. And it's showed the team wasn't very good for the first half. They took a chance by trading up for Cespedes after the Flores deal didn't pan out, and it worked out, and they went on a huge run. So who knows? Anything can happen. But I don't know. Let's jump in. Well, let me catch up on a couple more comments before. Ethan says, "What's good? What up, Ethan?
Ethan.
What if Acuna becomes like his brother? That would be the dream, right? But I don't think
We're praying for.
I don't think he's quite to that level. What if Snell wanted to accept a 3 or 4 year deal now? I'd have to look in. I really don't think he's gonna do that. I don't see. I know it's taking a while, so we're assuming that some of these guys' demands are gonna go down. I just don't see it. Scott Boras is his agent, right? Or am I wrong on that?
I'm not sure who's representing him, to be honest with you. I believe it's Boris, though. Yeah.
But if it is Scott Boras, that's not a guy that usually like goes back on his demands, right? Like he's gonna try and get this guy a 5, 6, 7 year deal. So I don't see it happening.
It's an if, though. That's a big what if. And MEZ, if that if is true and he wants 3 to 4 years, honestly, I might take a whiff at it if I'm the Mets. But I just don't. I agree with you, Nelson. I can't see that coming to fruition.
Yeah, listen, for the years and money I thought he was going to get, I would not sign him. But if it comes down to he comes down to earth to a 3 year deal, then yeah, how could you not consider that? Like our rotation isn't good enough to where you can pass something like that up. So you have to at least consider it. Vladdy was a nice little, yeah, we did get little Vladdy in the international signing period, so that we'll see. He wasn't one of the big. I don't know about that. Be with the Mets in 3 years. These kids are we got to remember, these kids are super young. Like, these are 16, 17-year-old kids. Like, they haven't even this is their first venture into pro ball. Like, I don't know that they'll be ready. And Vladdy, as yeah, he's got the pedigree with the name, but he wasn't one of the higher ranked prospects as far as the international guys. So there's no guarantee that he's gonna be his dad or his brother. My guy B says, "Hey Nelson and Chris, sorry I continue not to say your name." uh, makes Pete expendable. Yeah, I don't know. I'd
Talking
hesitate
about
to.
Parada.
What's that? Was
He's
that
talking
Parada?
about Parada.
He was talking about Parada. Yeah, I don't know that even Parada makes Pete expendable though. Like, he's he could be good, but I don't think he's that level. LFGM. Okay, John.
John doesn't like what the Mets are doing, but we support his thoughts and opinions regardless. We'll let him spit his facts or whatever he thinks in the chat. Shout out John for just being here. Let's
Yeah,
move into the middle infield talent.
yeah. Let's move on. Middle infield talent. Let's wrap things up a little bit. We got the Mets ranks for 2024. Jet Williams is number 1, Acuna number 3, Vargas at 6, Jeremy Rodriguez at 7, Mauricio at 8. I didn't. Where were these rankings from?
I'm pretty sure these are baseball prospectuses. No, they're not baseball prospectuses. I don't know. Honestly, I gotta source this. I gotta find the source for this because I thought I got this
Yeah,
on BP's top 10, but I gotta
I'm just
double check
interested.
because they didn't have him. BP
Seeing
didn't have him
Mauricio,
in. Yeah,
seeing
they didn't have him in
Mauricio
the top.
under those young, like really young kids is interesting to me. Like, but no, well, whatever. Colin Houck
Some
is
list had him number 8.
yeah, Colin Houck 9. Honorable mention Jeremiah Jackson. So yeah, the Mets have a plethora of young talent, especially in the middle infield. And there's guys even further down this list that are even younger that are like years down the road that are also middle infield prospects. So the Mets have really beefed up their infield prospects, especially up the middle. So you would have to hope, right, that at least you hit on 2 of these guys at very minimum. Hopefully more than that. But if you can hit and get like an actual major league caliber borderline star player, if not a star player, out of these guys, then you're in pretty good shape, right? And the same can be said for any position group, but like these guys in particular. I don't know, man. I'm very happy with what we've built. And who knows? Like we keep saying it throughout this show. Like, who knows what's gonna happen? Where these kids end up? They may not even be Mets long term. They may get traded at some point. But having this much depth, having the ability to say, listen, a Marco Vargas is expendable because we have Jet Williams and we have Luis Acuna. A Jeremy Rodriguez is expendable. A Colin Houck, like I'm sure there's teams out there that would love to have those kids. And we, after maybe giving some time and seeing what we think of them throughout the season, we can be in that position of power to say, listen, we can move so and so to get better at another position because we have freaking what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 guys that are like
Yeah,
have the potential to really help. So I love where we're at as far as these guys, and you know me, I'm a Jet guy.
sure.
Sucks what happened to Ronnie because we don't know what we're gonna get out of Ronnie now. He's gonna be gone all year, but yeah, man, I'm pumped to see where these guys end up, and I mean, we don't even talk about Colin Houck. This guy's a
Yeah.
guy we drafted that is a top 10 level talent. So just have a plethora of talent, man. What do you think of this group?
First and foremost, I heard some Colin Houck disrespect on timeline the last couple of weeks after one measly season. So I'm not buying into all of that in terms of what they're saying about him. I still think we got a steal of a deal at 32 overall when we got penalized in the last draft. So shout out Colin Houck. But yeah, I think this is just a testament into how genius this last trade deadline really was. I mean, you look at a guy like Vargas, Rodriguez, and Jeremiah Jackson here, all these guys coming over at the MLB trade deadline. Jeremiah Jackson being in that Dominic Leone trade, Mark Vargas with David Robertson, and obviously Jeremy Rodriguez with the Tommy Pham trade. And like you said to this point, and that point that you said in terms of flipping these guys, I don't think, obviously, we're not going to see it this offseason. That's like a next offseason type of thing and into the future. And that same logic applies to Kevin Parada for the same reason, because the Mets really aren't in any sort of position to trade prospects right now for any sort of MLB ready talent if this is going to be a reset bridge year like MEZ's telling John in the chat. Yeah, but absolutely, these guys all can't see the field, the major league field in Queens, with only two positions to give, and we already have Francisco Lindor taking one of those positions over the long haul. So really, second base is the only thing that's going to be the wild card, considering Jeff McNeil is going to be gone after 3 more years, and we don't even know his status with the Mets is going to be moving forward anyways as second baseman. That remains to be seen. So these guys are either going to have to change positions, right? And the only other position that's presumably going to be open for them to change to, with Drew Gilbert probably going to be manning center field, and we got, I guess, Ryan Clifford rising through the ranks as well, is potentially a corner outfield spot if Ryan Clifford doesn't pan out, right? Or third base if Brett Baty doesn't pan out. Those are the only two positions outside of second base, right? Second base, third base, and a corner outfield spot are the only three positions that these guys are going to be able to transfer to. And I can sure as hell guarantee, and we'll get into not next slide, but 2 slides from now, why I really think it's a pipe dream in terms of the 2027 Fangraphs Mets projected lineup. Yeah, they projected a lineup all the way until 2027 with these prospects. I don't think it's feasible. So we're going to see trades happen with these guys as names in it, and it's going to suck if we trade a Marco Vargas or Jeremy Rodriguez and flip them for a premier bat and see them go kill it on with some other team and throughout the entirety of their career. It's going to suck, but that's the nature of the business. In order to set yourself up for success, talent is always sort of being flipped. And I think that is what we're going to see with this middle infield group too. But just to have this at your disposal is something that is definitely a strong suit for the Mets right now when you look at potential trades moving forward. And you can even, like, with the rotation issues that the Mets have, you can even flip these guys for rotation pieces. I dropped a video on my channel on the True Mets Talk podcast talking about Freddie Peralta next offseason as a way too early type of trade. Who knows? Willy Adames is hitting free agency for them this coming season, after this season, the Milwaukee Brewers. They're probably looking to get younger. I don't know who they have in their top 10, but maybe they might need a middle infielder, which you can go up and hit them up for Freddie Peralta and solidify your rotation. So this is very, very good to have an excess of. And all these guys are very capable. Jeremiah Jackson killed it when he came over from the Angels organization. And shout out Tone, our guy Baseball Tone. Check him out as well. He basically was on the Till Mets Do Us Part live stream and said, of all the middle infield guys that are coming up, he thinks Jeremiah Jackson is going to be the best one. Now, that's a bold claim. I'll say that's a bold claim, but that's a testament to how deep this position group is for the minor league system for the New York Mets. So, like I said, it's a great problem to have, but it gets a little tricky when you have to pick and choose who's going and who's staying.
Yeah, listen, I love Tone. I don't know if I can get on board with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I
Let's
agree with
face
that.
it, Jeremiah Jackson was a trade for which he was the one for
Dominic Leone.
Leo. I don't. It's great what he did for us last year, but it's hard to believe that a guy that we got in a trade for Dominic Leone is going to really be a difference maker on the New York Mets at any point. It could happen. I'm not saying it can't, but over a Jet Williams, over an Acuna, I find it hard to believe. If anything, he's one of those guys that is going to end up in a as a throw in a trade at some point.
But to reinforce your thought on the lists, right? You said lists don't mean anything, and just because Jeremiah Jackson's not ranked doesn't mean he can't be it. But I agree with you in that you have to convince not only obviously the fans, right? Obviously Jeremiah Jackson was able to convince Mr. Tone of his abilities, but you have to convince the front office that you belong here over a guy like Luis Angel. You have to convince the front office of that. And I think that preconceived notion of who he was drafted for, I don't know if the front office, they probably don't view it the same as the fans, but like I said, like you have to be convincing on all counts. It can't just be you come over and you perform well for a stretch of period and then you go back to whatever you were before, with the reason being the Angels let you go in the first place. So I don't know, man. I got to watch more of Jeremiah Jackson, but shout out to him though. He did.
Yeah, no, he performed well last year. I need to see what he does this year, right? Like, there's a reason that Angels were willing to give him up. Like, let's be real. I know everybody makes fun of the Angels, but you don't give up a guy that you think is going to be a major league ready player at some point for Dominic Leone, who, I mean, let's face it, he was trash. So that's why I hesitate, just because I gotta believe like these scouts know more than us at some point. So it's, I mean, yeah, it could be a Cinderella story, and this kid could end up being a stud. You never know, but I'm hesitant to give him that status yet. Let's see what he does this year, um, and see. And let's face it, these guys. I know we said these rankings don't mean anything, but he had that solid of a year, and he still isn't on any like rankings per se. So that's got to mean something as well. Like, there's something in his game that people see that they're like, he's still not on these other guys' level. So we'll see. Maybe we could be shocked. You never know. Let's move on to, what are we looking at? Oh, the projected lineup. Let's close this out here. So we got the 2024 projected lineup according to Fangraphs. We got Brandon Nimmo leading off, McNeil second, Lindor at third, Pete Alonso cleanup, Starling Marte fifth, DJ
Like,
Stewart at DH, Francisco Alvarez, Brett Beatty, and Harrison Bader.
what would you change? Just objectively looking at this lineup, what would you change? Because I would change a few things. Obviously, I think that this is per Fangraphs. Obviously, Mark Vientos is probably going to get the nod. I think the majority nod at DH, and then I think that you really just I'm not confident at all. I had a tweet up there today about Starling Marte and my lack of confidence in him, and people were sort of chiming in on all counts. And you can't roll with him at the fifth spot. You just can't do it.
Yeah, for my first thing is I'm moving Marte down in the lineup. I like Bader actually in that 9 hole. Kind of gives you like a dual speed threat there back with him and Nimmo, because Nimmo has speed, he just doesn't use it. um, I don't hate McNeil second. I do like. I know that the lineup isn't deep enough, right? Where you can, so I can see why Lindor is in the 3 spot, but I really liked what Lindor could give you out of that 2 hole. This is where adding another bat would be so big, because it allows you to lengthen the lineup and change this around. Because at this point, I would roll with Alvarez at the 5 spot. I know that might be early for some people, uh, to give him that role, but look at all these other hitters. He's the best guy on the. He's the best hitter. Like, after Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, and Alonso, he's the next best guy. So to me, you put him at 5th, and then whatever at that point, because the rest of these guys, I don't really believe in most of them. I hope Brett Beatty can bounce back. It would be amazing. Like, if Brett Beatty can live up to his potential and be that solid third baseman from the 6 hole, like, that's a difference maker too. Like, we talk about Marte bouncing back being the difference maker. If Brett Beatty turns into what Brett Beatty was supposed to be, then this lineup looks way better and this team looks way better, right? So, yeah, to me, you gotta just roll with Alvarez in that 5 spot. hopefully Brett Beatty figures it out, can be that consistent 6 hitter, and then you can roll with Marte and whoever your DH is at 7, 8, and Bader ninth. And who knows? Maybe if Vientos does get the shot, and he's outproducing what those projections were, maybe he can be a 5 or 6 guy. But right now, to me, it's Alvarez, and you go from there. McNeil. The one thing I want to see from McNeil, because I don't mind him in the 2 hole, they need to keep him in a spot. That last year they jerked him around way too much.
Yeah.
He was all over the lineup. Give him a spot in the lineup and let him do his thing. He obviously doesn't provide a ton of power. He's a slap hitter. He's gonna hopefully hit 300 for you and get on base. And that, in theory, would be perfect in that 2 hole, but you just don't have. You only have Lindor and Alonso to just drive him in at this point. Well, Alvarez too, but it, this is why that, to me, that DH is crucial, man. But we'll see. We'll see. It looks like we're gonna go with Vientos, but hopefully we do get that guy. So what are your thoughts here?
I have a couple of thoughts here outside of just the personnel. Obviously, Mark Vientos is going to be that guy for the DH. I mean, DJ Stewart's fine. He's serviceable. But, I mean, if we're going to use Mark Vientos and roll with him and not sign a bat, like this lineup screams that it desperately needs, then it has to be Mark Vientos, right? But, yeah, I agree. Signing a bat mitigates a lot of these problems that we have. A couple of things that I might try here. Starling Marte, obviously, just put him down in the lineup. Obviously, you have to do that. Maybe even the 2 spot, like Emizy's saying. Maybe Starling Marte can go back to the 2 spot and thrive there. I'm not sure. Regardless.
I mean,
Francisco
that's
Alvarez,
basically where we have always played them, right?
yeah, essentially. Which, I mean, at this point, we'll see. Like 2022, he thrived there, and 2023, he didn't. So which version are we getting? I think that's the common theme here. But I said it on the Hot Stove Live. The only other person that I can genuinely see be that 5-hole hitter behind Pete Alonso is Francisco Alvarez. Like you just said, I've been saying that. And I'm like, do you really want to handcuff him in year 2? You might be forced to at this point, because honestly, you just can't have Starling Marte out there. But it's unfortunate to do that to him, given the way he struggled down the stretch. I know he's the only pretty much capable power bat outside of those guys in the middle. I mean, Mark Vientos is capable. Let's be honest, though. He's not on any level that Francisco Alvarez is. But I just can't see where that it's feasible. Like, that's not acceptable. Like, protect your young guy and his confidence and go sign that bat so you don't have to do that. Go get that one-year deal bat if he's out there on the market. What 2 questions for you, because Hector, got to give credit to Hector for saying this. And honestly, I know where he was coming from with this. I'm hesitant to sort of do it, but he said if you don't want to put Francisco Alvarez in that 5-hole and you don't want to do that to him, the only other guy that can mimic that sort of power, and if you don't want to do it to Mark Vientos either, right? I don't think that's feasible, is taking Brandon Nimmo out of that leadoff hole and putting him behind Pete Alonso with his increased power numbers, which is tough. At face value, I know a lot of people are going to be against it, but I can see the logical thought process behind that reasoning and behind that thought. That's a tough one, though. It's a very tough one. But if you don't do that, the only other thing that I can think of here is mitigating Pete Alonso, putting him at the 3-hole and protecting Pete Alonso with Lindor and moving Lindor to the 4 spot and just flip-flopping those guys. That's the only other reason that I can think of, or the only other sort of mitigation that I can think of.
Yeah, I don't love Lindor in the cleanup spot. Uh, I don't hate the idea. It really depends on what Nimmo you're getting. Even though the numbers from 2022 and 2023 were pretty much similar, there was a difference in approach for Brandon Nimmo
Yes.
last year. Let's face it. So if you're gonna get last year's Nimmo, if he's looking to sell out for power more, then yeah, I might be inclined to move him to the 5th spot. Am I still here?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
But if he gets together with Eric Chavez and they talk and they want to try to get back to that approach that he had in 2022, where he was just, I mean, he would start games with like 20 pitch at bats at times. Like he
Yeah.
was really working counts and getting on base. If we get that approach and that's what we want to do, then I would be hesitant to move him because I really like that out of my leadoff hitter. I mean, maybe McNeil. McNeil's the problem with McNeil is he likes to swing first pitch a lot, right? He's an aggressive hitter. So while a 300 hitter from the leadoff spot wouldn't be solid, he doesn't really work counts a lot. He's not a prototypical leadoff hitter. I just don't know who the hell else is gonna lead off if you don't lead Nimmo off, right? Like McNeil seems to be looking at this the only other guy. I don't see Lindor as a leadoff hitter. I think he's done it
He
in the
could, though.
past.
He did it in Cleveland,
Yeah,
no?
yeah,
He did
he's
it in
done.
Cleveland.
I still don't love that though, because then your middle of the lineup is trash.
Agreed.
So that's the problem with moving McNeil with moving Nimmo from that leadoff spot is we don't really have another leadoff hitter. So that's tough, right? So I don't know. To me, the best solution, and we've said it, just get your DH, man. Go find
Go
one,
sign a bat. That's right.
go sign a bat, and then you lengthen this lineup. It looks a lot better to me with an actual name, whether it beats Turner, Martinez, Soler, whoever. This lineup looks way deeper with that name slotted in there over what we're looking at right now. Like I said, though, that difference maker is, to Measy's point, Marte bouncing back, but I have trouble seeing that. And the second one is Brett Beatty. Like, can Brett Beatty be minor league Brett Beatty? Because minor league Brett Beatty is a capable major league player and could really make a difference on this team. A guy that can hit 270, 280, get you 20 homers. That's a capable guy, right? But I don't love the way this lineup looks without a DH. If Nimmo's still ripping bombs, I think I dropped Nimmo to 2 or 3 in the lead. I just don't know. I don't love McNeil in the leadoff. He's too aggressive for me. Like he's a first pitch guy. I like that from him, but I don't like it in the leadoff spot. Like I really want a guy in that leadoff spot that's gonna work the count. Like that's, to me, like that's important.
Josh makes a very valid point here as well in terms of the other way around with what we have right now on the screen, in terms of him saying, what's the point of Nimmo working a count to get on and having McNeil slap a soft ground ball to second for a double play? He doesn't like McNeil in the 2 spot. So that's why I'm like, you might as well just put Marte in the 2 spot, although he's not a sure thing either.
Well,
So
that's why I mentioned Lindor, because I like Lindor in the 2 spot.
me too. Me too.
Again, you move Lindor to the 2 spot, you're weakening your middle of the order. But if you signed a damn DH, that would mitigate that a little bit. So I don't know. I think the way I would do it, I'm just gonna lay it out. The way I would do it is Nimmo 1, Lindor 2. I don't love McNeil at 3, but if we don't sign anybody else, I guess that would have to be the case. Unless you move, no, because we need another bat. We need another bat. It's every time I look at it, no matter how you shake it, you need somebody else there to be able to do what you really want to do. But you're right.
I'll tell you what I'll do.
They might just
I'll tell you what I do.
And whatever. I don't know.
I'll tell you what I do. I think that I'm completely fine with a reshape of this entire lineup. Yeah, and I agree with you. Like we're frustrated here trying to figure this out without that bat. Absolutely. Like this is a no one size fits all, no one size fits all answer. What I would do objectively is just shake it all up. I'd have Lindor bat lead off. And I know this is never going to happen. This is just for fun, right? I'd have Lindor bat lead off. I'd have Marte at 2. I'd have Nimmo at 3, Pete at 4, Alvarez at 5, and just have to do it to Alvarez. McNeil at 6, Beatty, then Bader. That's what I would do. And then Vientos, wherever 7, 8, whatever. The bottom 3 is going to be Vientos, Beatty, Bader. That's what it's going to be.
I
But
don't
I
hate
would say, yeah, that's what I would do. I
I
think
don't hate
Lindor's
that.
capable from the leadoff spot, and Nimmo, honestly, with his increased power, if that's the approach he's going to take, I understand the OBP didn't really take a hit, but the power's there. He's capable at the 3 spot. I'm sorry. I agree with Josh. I think he said that as well. So
Yeah, I honestly don't hate that at all. Um, it's just the lineup is hard. Like you can obviously put it together and work it out, but it's really hard to make it make sense to me without an extra bat. Like right now, it, that DH spot, I just don't have the confidence in Vientos or DJ Stewart. Like I don't. I know some people do. I don't. So there's 2 more slides here. What are we looking at? This
I had to laugh at
2027.
this.
Jesus,
I had to laugh at this.
what do we got? Brett Beatty at first base. So I'm guessing. Oh, they moved Pete to. So we kept Pete Alonso, but he moved over to designated hitter. Brett Beatty, first baseman, doesn't
Makes
compute
no
in my.
sense. This is just funny. It doesn't take into account any signings, obviously. But my main point of why I'm laughing is that this is like all prospects coming up and panning out, and like this is definitely like
Yeah,
there's going to be
that's hard.
signings in between.
That's hard to imagine. I do see a world where Jet Williams could be your center fielder. They have tried him out there. From what I heard, he looked. I actually saw something. He did look somewhat solid in the outfield. He's got the speed to man center, so I could see that. I could see a world where Jet Williams is in center and Drew Gilbert is in right field. Like that.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
makes sense to me.
Sure.
Pete me moved to designated hitter. That's obviously feasible. I don't see a world where Brett Beatty is playing first base. If Brett Beatty pans out and he's still on the Mets in 2027, I'm thinking he's still your third baseman. Like, let's be real, right? But somewhere here, somebody's not going to pan out. Whether it's Beatty, Acuna, Mauricio, or even Jet or Drew. Like, I know we love those guys, but let's be honest, they're not a sure thing either. There's no such thing as a sure thing. So there's no world where this is actually going to be the case. It would be awesome if it was because, I mean, that allows us to whether if we can't get any of our pitching prospects to pan out, we can go sign whoever the hell we want if we got all these guys on the cheap other than Pete and Lindor. But yeah, it is a funny lineup. I did Brett Beatty at first base just doesn't compute. Like it makes my brain malfunction.
Obviously, I'm going to say a couple of things here, and they might be a little bit way too early of a prediction for me, but I'm going to say it anyways because the offseason's slow and we need some entertainment, right? Obviously, a 2027 projected lineup is hard, and we have Sanders here saying that they're not even taking into account Ryan Clifford, who can be a potential DH in the future, right? Keep Pete at first base. Go get me Juan Soto in the 2025 offseason, and then we have a lineup. Get Brett Beatty out of first base, let Pete have it, and go get me Soto. But what I can really see here, and I've said it before, like we're talking about odd man out, and we're talking about guys just not panning out, and like the excess of middle infield talent. I can for sure see a situation where I hate to say it. I hate to put him being that guy and being the one that's gone. I hate to say it, but Luis Angel Acuna, I can see him being flipped for either a premier bat or a premier pitcher. Like I can just see that happening. Because like let's face it, in 2027, we're not going to see all these prospects. Like they're not all going to pan out. And I just can't see a world where that's the case. So I can see one of these guys being traded because I think it's going to have to happen. And I can see Luis Angel Acuna. And like when I say it has to happen, I'm not talking about those tier B prospects and Marco Vargas. Like even right now, to get the lineup to where you want it to be, unless this is your end all be all lineup right here, which I can confidently say that's not what I want, right? And that's probably not what anybody wants. We need more veteran experience to try to get to that World Series and give us production in the playoffs. Not saying these guys can't, but let's go sign a big bat is what I'm saying here. These guys immediately that are ready to be called up in Williams, Angel Acuna, Luis Angel Acuna, and Drew Gilbert, like it's not feasible for them to all be in this lineup. So I don't know, man. It's tough to predict, but that would be my prediction.
Let's be real too. The worst gloves on this lineup are probably more likely to go.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so
That's
while Luis Angel Acuna might be the guy, I can also see a world where Ronnie Mauricio isn't on this team, right?
true.
He's
True.
not a he could probably fare okay in the infield, but let's face it, he hasn't looked great on the defensive side of things. Not to say he can't improve, but he just hasn't. And Brett Beatty's another guy. I mean, they have him moving to freaking first base, which I don't see, but he can't handle third base right now. So I don't know. Maybe he'll improve, right? And if he's your third baseman, then that definitely that's one less spot for Mauricio, right? So there's a couple guys out there. I mean, Beatty could even get moved. If I had to guess, the three guys that I would say would go before anybody else would be Beatty, Acuna, and Mauricio. Like,
Yep.
I
Completely agree.
just feel like that's the case. I could be wrong. I'm not like setting that in stone. I just see it those three being more expendable than everybody else. But who knows? 2027 is a long ways away.
That's for sure.
We'd have any. I mean, there's no way. Like we're gonna sign players and whatnot. So this isn't definitely not going to be the lineup. But it is a funny little experiment and thing to look at. So let's. I mean, we've been going on for.
Josh, if you missed it, Josh, not to cut you off, but yes, we did talk about that, which is what we made sure to cover here with this excess of talent. We already went
Yeah.
over the middle infielders that the Mets have. So go back and check out the replay, but we talked about that. And like, this is a good problem to have. And that's why that's why like I thought these two topics would go hand in hand. And that's why I wanted to end with this because I saw this Fangraphs 2027 projection. I just had to laugh because I was like, we were already talking about the excess of talent. So it goes hand in hand. But yeah, good comment. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And this doesn't even count for like. I mean, at 2027, did we trade Colin Houck too? Did he not pan out? Like, who knows? Like, he's another guy. He could be up or he could get traded or there's a ton of we have a ton of infield talent. We're in a good spot, man. I know people don't want to hear that, but we are. For our future, we're in a good spot. Um, we have enough talent that you have to think some of these guys at some point we're going to get lucky and some of these guys are going to pan out, right? We can't it can't just be the Braves all the time being the only ones that have every prospect hit, right? So or the Dodgers or what have you. So at some point some of these guys are going to be good players for us and we're going to trade some other guys and we're going to bring in more talent and hopefully you're right. And Juan Soto is a freaking Met, and he's the DH. And we have a lineup with a middle of the lineup with Soto, Alvarez, and Pete. Like you can dream, right? So we'll see. We haven't even got through 2024. Hopefully, 2024. I'm of the belief that it's going to go better than a lot of people think. I think we're going to be in the hunt. I don't know. Not saying we're going to make the playoffs, but I think we'll be close. So we'll see what happens. Any last words? What do you got to say to the people before we head out of here? And we'll
No,
wrap.
I mean, before we wrap up, I wanted to thank everybody in the chat. Thank you for everybody supporting. Just as always, make sure you hit that thumbs up on both streams. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and tell your friends and tell your family if they're Mets fans and want to talk, get some objective talk about this team moving forward. Make sure you subscribe to the channels. What I wanted to just say here is in lieu of the slow news days, obviously we have the hater signing. I just wanted to talk about the projections for this team in 2024 and start to sort of just envision what we're working with here in 2024, as well as what we have in the farm system in 2024 and beyond with these excess talents, right? And these lists that we all see, but not really anybody wants to sort of acknowledge as of yet in terms of the problem the Mets are going to have moving forward with having that excess talent. So I wanted to get the ball rolling in terms of these topics and address those because I think a lot of people in the chat were so consumed of what's happening this offseason in free agency and what's happening at the major league level and everybody being disappointed in that right now in terms of the roster construction and not really understanding how much talent is waiting to come up and make this team better in future years. So that's all I got. I appreciate everyone watching. Hopefully we get some more solidified news surrounding the actual major league roster moving forward and who we're going to see on the 26-man roster moving forward in 2024. But until that point, like I said, it's been a couple slow news days, and just bear with us. I appreciate it. And I think I think John was saying, is Hector Neris going to sign with the Yankees? I saw some smoke about that. Reportedly, he wants 3 years, $50 million, but that was according to Hector Gomez. So we'll see what happens there. And with the Astros just signing Josh Hader, it would not surprise me if the Yankees are like, okay, fine, that's our direct competition. Let's go match for match and sign their ex-player in Hector Neris, who turned his career around. So it's going to be very interesting. I would not.
I feel like that's a bad mix.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. It could be. But what I'm just saying is, like, remain patient. Like, you see all these guys signing these big names. It sucks that it's not going to be us. I'm not foreshadowing that it's going to be us on any of these big names, and it does suck. But I guess we just have to weather the storm, and that's the cards that we've been dealt with right now. So, like I said, it is what it is at this point. We have, Mets Twitter was on fire today about disagreements of opinions of how we talk about this team moving forward. And I'm not going to get into that. I saw the back and forth on Twitter. I try to stay out of that, but like I said, we keep it objective and we talk about this team in a good light. So
yeah, no, I dropped a video today where it gets so old to me. Like, these arguments, I just can't do it. I don't have the energy for it. Maybe it's because I'm an old man. I just don't want to hear it. It's too many people. You can't just have civil disagreements. It's everybody starts yelling at each other, and it's just a hot mess. And I don't have the patience. I don't have the patience for these WFAN idiots. Like, I really just don't. I'm so done. But before we head out of here, again, thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate everybody leaving comments. Please, like Chris said, you could drop a like or a comment on both streams. That would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to both of our channels. I'll go ahead and drop this stuff real quick. Follow me on X if you're on X at Amish Country Met. Of course, subscribe to my YouTube at Amish Country Mets Fan. CP's YouTube, CPNY Sports. He also does Knicks Rangers content as well. So check that out. Follow him on X and Instagram at CPNY Sports, and follow our joint account at Interstate Mets. So we'll give you updates on the show and when we're going live. We'll probably start to try to do these more often once the season gets rolling. So be on the lookout for that. So please, like I said, like, comment, subscribe to both channels. Appreciate everyone watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for watching the Interstate Mets Report. Streaming Tuesdays at 5 p.m. and Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to at Amish Country Mets Fan and at CPNY Sports.